We've been trained to believe that everything is a YouTube algorithm serving us video shorts. We've been trained to believe that bigger numbers are better than small numbers. The internet itself is loaded with values
Mm-hmm.
and loaded with religion.
Mm-hmm.
And and the beauty of AI in some ways is that it has surfaced that religion and made it overt. And now we see how silly the religion is. All right, welcome to Working Broken with me, Nick Richmeyer, and Brad Ferris,
Hey there.
where every other week we take a deep dive, or maybe a little more than every other week, we take a deep dive into a trend or a bias or a topic that is affecting business leaders today. We've been doing this for a little bit, asking the question, is it working or is it broken? And because, those of you who we've interacted with, who've messaged back to us and we've talked to offline and online, really have said, yeah, we've been trying to follow the rules, and you know what? The rules don't work very well. But we don't really know what our other alternatives are. And that's really been the spirit of this show, right? Is, can we look under the hood and go, well, maybe there's a set of assumptions here that aren't necessarily the right assumptions. And then what would it look like to do something different? And we've really tried to come at that from Brad and I's both shared and distinct areas of expertise. Yeah. And today we have a really special and unique episode because we're going to ask the question, is this podcast working or is it broken?
Yeah.
And we're going to come at that actually from the angle of a little bit, read the last page first kind of a thing. And that we're going to start transitioning the structure of this. And you'll hear more about that in a little bit, of how we do this and why we do it and what it's going to entail along the way. But before we get into that, I want to, Brad, ask you, we've been doing this for a while. We're, almost 20 episodes in. A lot of episodes don't make it to 15, 16, 20 episodes, don't get past 10. So way to go us. But what has your kind of experience of it been broadly?
So, one of the things that I was excited about was having these kinds of conversations where we can bring questions that we have. And I really value knocking these kind of things around with you, Nick. I think that you and I have different perspectives on a lot of things. You help me to grow my perspective and also are a good red team about sometimes the assumptions that I'm making. And I think vice versa. And so my thought was, this is going to be a great opportunity for us to kind of sharpen our saws and kind of share that with the rest of the internet at the same time. And I think to a large extent that was a success. I think that part of the podcast has been working, that we have been able to bring some topics where we had a divergence of opinion and kind of push some things around and have you challenge my thinking, have me challenge your thinking, and maybe come out with more clarity at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think, in classic, you hear, I don't know if you've heard this little meme or whatever it is, where basically the way we're going to solve the male loneliness crisis is just have all men have a podcast. This is how men do friendship now, is they have a podcast. And I think to some degree that you and I were having rich conversations and we thought, well, let's see if anybody else is interested in our rich conversations. And I think to a degree that was true. I think I know you have, I know I have had, the second and third degree conversations of, hey, I listened to the podcast, let's have this conversation afterwards.
Yes, very much.
Which was affirming and certainly kept us going and kept us producing in the style that we were producing. That's a little bit of the working take. Where's the broken take? What wasn't working for you?
So it was interesting when you and I would get together to look at topics. There was not as much overlap in the topics that I was interested in talking about and the topics that you were interested in talking about that I expected. And it was not even that something that I was interested in you weren't interested in. It was just like, either I don't have a good take on that, or I don't really want to talk about that on the internet, or there were various reasons why we were not necessarily aligned on the topics that stirred our soup.
You wanted to poke me and try and get me to say incendiary things about the about the incoming administration back in February, and I wasn't going to do
That
that.
was not, it was not about the incoming administration. It was a topic that they had a point of view on that I didn't know, was it working or broken, like.
Takeaway for those listening, Brad was trying to get me on an FBI watch list. When I wouldn't do it, no, just kidding.
I took my ball and went home.
No, I think, I just really quickly responding to your comment about topics. I think that was an interesting take, and I think we are both avid podcast listeners. One of the things that makes a podcast great is its really unique ability to be both broad and narrow at the same time. So you don't feel like you're hitting the same content button every week. I think there are very good, really niche podcasts, right? Where
Sure.
it's like this is a podcast about grammar, or something. I listen to that podcast; it's very good.
I have a podcast about sales. It's a very narrow topic, and they kind of say the same things over and over again, but I kind of need to hear them over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's useful for me.
But I think the ones that I find really tantalizing have a very strong sort of focusing POV, and that tends to kind of pull the right topics to the surface, even if sometimes those topics are disparate.
Yes.
And I think what you and I ended up doing is because we ended up engaging this from the vantage point of like, well, we think a lot of stuff is interesting, right? So let's talk about email marketing. Let's talk about AI. Let's talk about, and I think that can, for the people who know us, I think that can be a fun hang of
right.
Here's some freewheeling talking about interesting things. I think even the concept of working broken at the time that we released it into the wild, now looking back, I'm like, well, gosh, it's been a year where kind of everything feels broken.
I was going to say, it's hard to find things that are working.
Yeah. And that it was hard even from a creating content standpoint, creating episode standpoint, to not just feel like you're one more person piling on the misery.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that certainly wasn't the spirit that we were showing up with, but it's like,
right.
I can remember going through topic lists and go, well, I can dunk on that if you want, but like, do we really need one more person to dunk on that? I don't know, but anyway, I interrupted you.
Well, I mean, the to your point, if everything is feeling broken and if we're just coming out over and over again saying it's broken, it's also not necessarily helping anybody to get to a future that they want to be in. And I think that, for me, that was one of the things that was not working about the podcast, is that as a general way of being, I want to help people to end up in a better place. And certainly dunking on things is not on brand for me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I think the ground, for me, the ground shifted really fast. Like if I think about the things I was talking about in 24, and I was, raising some red flags on things and going, hey guys, this is not good, right? We are on a path to the status quo of or everything that we think is normal about the internet or whatever is going to shift dramatically, and that needs to change the way we show up from a venture management standpoint. I think in early to mid 24, that felt fresh.
Sure.
Or fresh-ish. And then all of a sudden, really surprisingly to me, the zeitgeist got their head around that really fast. And the idea of a closed internet or a dead internet or the slopification of everything. And Cory Doctorow gets a lot of credit for this, rightfully, of really raising the alarm on enshittification. There was just not much else to say about that hadn't already been said.
Well, I think you add to that at that same time, there were a lot of layoffs going on. There was a lot of job uncertainty, and just the business zeitgeist turned from a growth-oriented to more of a defensive posture.
That's right.
And I think that made those conversations less relevant also.
Yeah, because I think what we were finding in our private life, and this will get a little bit to where we're headed in today's call, but what we were finding in our private life is real people going, okay, I get it. Everything's fucked, but now what do I do?
Right. Exactly.
And not that we couldn't do that per se in the context of the way we've done the podcast, maybe with some tweaks, but, pushing a little farther, and I'll share a little bit from my vantage point too. There was also just an aspect of it where you did some evaluating of like, is this the right thing for me? Mm-hmm. And I think people hearing about that would be advantageous because we live in a world where it's like everybody needs to be doing all the channels all the time. So for you to go, actually, I need to do less for XYZ reasons might be interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, I'm going to credit you for some of this, Nick, because um, I think as the whole content marketing play has unwound, like whatever story you believed about content marketing in 2020, you probably don't believe that anymore.
Right.
And I think that for both of us, what would make a podcast successful is that we can go more extreme, that we can each be more of who we are. And that this structure wasn't allowing me to be fully as Brad as I wanted to be. And I think to some extent that you felt like you were compromising some of who Nick is and who Nick needs to be. And so that kind of content where we're finding the middle, I just don't think that has a lot of traction in 2025. And further, my business is really driven by person to person connections, and that the podcast was taking time that I could otherwise spend reaching out and having one-to-one conversations with people, which is really, at the end of the day, that's what drives my business is connecting individually to people. And the podcast is a podcast is because you're in people's ears, right? There's a parasocial relationship there. But I can do that guesting on other people's podcasts more effectively than trying to build my own podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's where it took us some time to really sort of parse out that we had slightly different objectives.
Yeah.
Even maybe that we didn't even know we had when we were first, getting up and running. I really, and again, we'll hear more about this as we go. I really was found myself wanting it to be an ideas podcast.
Yeah.
And maybe you beat this up if this isn't the right way of framing it based on what your experience was. It's hard to have an ideas podcast and a coaching podcast.
Right.
Right? Because coaching is so much about holding back your ideas so other people can find what they need. Right? That's part of what your magic in the world is you probably know what to do, but you know how to open up space so that people can find what they need to do.
I know what I want to do and what's right for me to do, but I don't necessarily know what's right for you to do. And that dynamic, I think, came out in the podcast where oftentimes I could put forward my point of view, but I also was facilitating you bringing your point of view out, which made for a weird dynamic, I think, between us on the podcast. In real life, we don't have this dynamic, but I think on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think because that's really where both of us were, functioning at like 75 or 80% is there was this impulse for you to be more Brad-ish, which would have put you a little bit in a coach's chair, and me to be more me-ish, which would have put me in sort of the rambling on about my ideas chair.
Well, a person who has ideas and wants to put them out in the world, and you want to put them out in full. Like you don't want to compromise them for whatever it is that the energy that I'm coming on with.
That kind of just makes for bad podcasting, right?
Yes, exactly.
So kudos to all of you who've been on the ride with us. We know it's been a bumpy one, but honestly, I don't think we win the award for the Razzie of worst podcast of the year. So
probably not.
We're learning as we go. So it's implied in what we've said, but we'll make it official. Brad, you're going to kind of step away from being a week in and week out participant in this. We're definitely going to drag you back in.
I look forward to being a part of it. Yeah,
on a recurring basis. And I really, so you and I came to that conclusion a few weeks back. We had a few recordings in the can, so you guys have heard those recordings for those of you who listen regularly. But a few weeks back, we made that decision. And then I had to wrestle with the decision of, okay, like, am I done with what I want to do? And for better or worse, y'all, the answer is no, I'm not done. You haven't gotten rid of me yet. You can unsubscribe, but you haven't gotten rid of me yet. Because I think, man, we have a conversation that needs to be had. And I want to have it with a broader audience of people. I really enjoyed the couple of interviews that I did pulling in. I
enjoyed those too.
I was really resistant to doing an interview podcast. There was like 852 million interview podcasts. But I started to ask myself, well, what if this was a very specific kind of interview podcast? And some of you know that on the internet and other places, I got this Dam's Given moniker thing. I honestly don't know where that came from. I honestly don't remember the origin story of Nick, a giver of dams, but it came from somewhere and has now a life of its own. And if I look at what's happening in our conversations and some of the despair that was creeping in underneath the topics that you and I were talking about on here, the hardest thing for people to do right now is to believe that they can make a difference,
Yes.
because economic power is being centralized, political power is being centralized, cultural power is being centralized. It's very easy to do that sort of thing where we just kind of slip into, well, it is what it is, and I just got to be along for the ride and hope I survive to different days. I am
And
just,
let me
yeah, go
add
ahead.
in there, that cultural zeitgeist also impacts people's individual lives, where when we feel like we have no agency in the world, then we start to believe we have no agency over our own lives also. And that is super corrosive. That's super corrosive to our own happiness. It's super corrosive to our communities. It's really something that I don't want to live in.
Yeah, I mean, I see this. You and I have talked about this offline, but I see this everywhere, and where as a culture and as people, we've so accepted that we are, being pressed in by powers outside of ourselves. And the natural one of the handful of natural reactions to that is then one of them is a fight reaction of, well, then
That's
I
right.
need to just, you know, take on the man
Yeah.
everywhere, right?
Tear down the clankers, whatever it is.
Yes. And like, this is a silly example, but it's so real. Like, because of my children's interests, I'm at the soccer field every weekend, like a lot of American dads. And one of the things that I've noticed in just the short lifetime of my kids is a massive increase in the percentage of the time that what's happening on the soccer field is about anger at the refs. Now, parents always are angry at the refs. I think that's just part of being a sports parent. But like, my kids are involved in sports. My wife works in athletics. And so we're at a lot of events because of her work where my kids aren't even involved. And I started just kind of mentally doing the math of what percentage of the time are we cheering for the kids
Mm-hmm.
versus percentage of the time that we're angry at the refs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a good number. It's not a good ratio. And I know that this is, it's maybe a weird analogy, but I started to connect it to this sense of lack of agency. Because
Yeah.
if I'm sitting there on the sidelines and I'm seeing this game play out, and my orientation to the world has become, those people are doing that thing, and therefore I can't do anything. Well, then I stop playing the game and I start playing the refs. And I'm watching the kids do this. I'm watching the parents do this. I'm watching the coaches do this. They stop playing the game, and the game, the game of life or whatever you want to call it, or the game of work or the game of career, and they start playing the refs. And there is so much out there in terms of our media saturation, social media, traditional media, alternative media, all of it's kind of one and the same now. It's all owned by the same 5 people.
It is. Yep.
And that's coercing us slowly but surely with algorithms and everything else to get out of the game and just play the refs. You see it on LinkedIn. Oh, well, we got to figure out the algorithm.
That's right. That's right.
To me, playing the algorithm is the same as playing the refs. And what happens is that people like us on this call stop believing that our choices matter. And I think inadvertently in some of our Working Broken podcasts, we reinforce that like, my God, everything's fucked. And that was not our spirit. That's not who we are. That's not what we're about.
Right.
So all that to say, what I was inspired to do, and of course, this is why we're going to need Brad along the way at various points, because he's such a contributor to this message, is we're going to pivot the podcast. This is the last ever of the Working Broken version of this podcast. We're going to pivot to calling it Dam's Given. And we're going to engage ideas and stories and experiences and leaders who are living in the vulnerability of giving a shit about the world that we make. They're not letting the ideas and the rhetoric of, well, what can we do? I guess I'll just, boycott Netflix. That's not going to do any good, right? And the sense of futility of all of that, and really exploring what I fundamentally believe is that the world that we want isn't a 180-degree turn from where we are.
Yes.
It's a 5 or 7 or 10 degree turn from where we are, with a reshaping of our attention, of how we attend to the world, not the attention we're trying to grab for, which is what we've been
Yes.
trained to do, but re-attending what we pay attention to, reframing what we pay attention to. And so I started to ask, well, what if the podcast was that? What if the podcast was a space where I changed what I pay attention to?
Yes. Right.
And you guys don't need one more voice about what's broken in the world. We're going to end up bumping into those things. My gosh, it's fucking everywhere. But the spirit of it is, okay, I got to wake up and live a life.
So tell us, Nick, as you've been working on this Dam's Given material, what are the things that you're starting to pull out that you're looking to explore more as you go further in the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of you know that some of this similar material is working its way into a book too. And that this is not this the podcast is not an ad for the book. It's certainly not. They're different things. But obviously the ideas intersect. And the book is about 7 rules that we know are true but we wish weren't true. And so I was mentioning attention earlier. One of them is about attention. The first rule is that nobody's paying attention. And part of the lie of the algorithmic economy is that if you do the right things, you can coerce attention out of people. And that lie has caused businesses to be complicit in the numbing of agency, that businesses are actively every day and marketers are actively every day doing things that degrade all of our ability to be participants in the world. We're a part of the problem because we're playing into the attention Olympics. And so I'm fascinated by people who aren't going to do that, who aren't going to say, here's me waving my hands, pay attention to me.
Yes.
I'm going to pay attention to you.
Also implicit in that lie is that we need thousands and thousands of people paying attention when 80 or 90% of the businesses that I work with need 10 or 20 or 100 or 200 people paying attention. And then that's plenty. And if you rewire yourself to think, how do I meet 10 people who want to pay attention? It's a whole different game.
Yeah, I wrote this example in the book, and I think it's germane here. I was listening to a podcast. It was a book reading podcast. And one of the participants on the podcast was talking about that she's always struggled with her like book reading goals. I want to read 50 books this year. I want to read 45 books this year. And just to give credit where credit is due, it's the What Should I Read Next podcast. It's a great little podcast. And she said she had transformed her annual planning strategy goals for book reading from I want to read X number of books to I want to read 5-star books. And she noticed the first year she did it, she's now 2 or 3 years into this change, how it completely changed her reading life. That when she was focused, when she was paying attention on, just want to read books I'm going to love. Did she love every book? No, but she read differently, dramatically differently, because she changed her framework on this. And that moved her attention. It moved the way she looked at the world and the decisions that she made. I think that I want to read 50 books this year, I want to read 100 books this year, is that attention economy methodology of we got to get to the big numbers to get to the small numbers. And it took me a while to unwind from the lies of the internet to remember that 20 years ago, I believed that we have to get to the small things first. That you build big things by building really good small things. And that the goodness of things starts with intention of what's right in front of you. But I'm also really, really aware that because we all have internet poisoning, it's going to be really hard to unwind that thinking.
And what I'm hearing there is that the thinking that has come out of Silicon Valley has changed business culture massively, but it's also changed culture in general, so that we tend to think about things in an algorithmic way. When we think about music, we think about what is produce algorithmic listens, as opposed to how do I connect with people who want to hear this music. And so if as you're listening, you're hearing, geez, that is kind of a problem, then I think this podcast would be really exciting.
Yeah. And I think if you're listening and you're going, oh, I have a vague sense of that, but I don't know what to do about it.
Yes.
I think then that's what this pivot is about, is how do I accept what ends up being really freeing truths about the way the world works and then lean into those truths. So coming back to this idea of internet poisoning, I think we're completely not completely, but we are widely unconscious of the level to which our entire framing of our life's experience is coming to us by way of algorithmic attention economy. We've been trained to believe that everything is an Amazon search. We've been trained to believe that everything is a YouTube algorithm serving us video shorts. We've been trained to believe that bigger numbers are better than small numbers. The internet itself is loaded with values and loaded with religion.
Mm-hmm.
And and the beauty of AI in some ways is that it has surfaced that religion and made it overt. And now we see how silly the religion is.
So if someone is listening to this podcast and a year from now they're still listening, what would you hope that they've learned or gained or has changed in them from the participation in this podcast?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, and I've talked about this with a few people related to the podcast and not, is one of the really corrosive things about internet poisoning is we tend to believe that we are way more vulnerable than we really are. So everything feels scary. Oh, I can't show up in that way. Oh, people are going to judge that. Oh, someone's going to comment on that. It's not going to get, we really start to think in the way of XYZ is not going to get enough likes, like, because the internet really has the social brain of a middle schooler, right? And middle school plays on fear and paranoia and shame, right? So middle school as a social structure thrives because of fear and paranoia and shame. I don't think he'd be embarrassed for me telling you. My son tripped on a water bottle and tripped and fell down the bleachers yesterday. And
that's horrible. Like that.
Yeah, horrible.
Right.
Horrible. But as he's telling me when he comes home, he's in like this chipper mood about it. I'm like, you seem fine with this. He goes, yeah, nobody made fun of me. And again, that sense of middle school brain, he's in middle school, that sense of middle school brain, that everything's ran through the lens of fear and intimidation and shame. The internet runs on fear and intimidation and shame. You have to show up. You have to be authentic. You have to get likes. You have to engage. You have to be in the zeitgeist of what the thing of the day is,
right,
whether that's on Spotify or on, like, you open up Netflix and it's trending now, right? It is built on a middle school brain. And that middle school brain communicates and tells us that we are really, really in danger. And everything is high risk and everything is transformative. It's going to define who's going to like you, what your future's going to be, what your options are. Now, most of this shows up as subtext, not text. It's underneath.
Right.
But that's the consistent messaging. And so by participating in the conversation that we're going to have together in Damsgiven with the guests that we're going to have, and we're very excited about kind of all that's coming with that. What I would want for you a year from now is to have heard some stories, listened to some thinking, explored things at a deeper level, and even taken some risks yourself.
That's it.
And you go, oh, I'm not as vulnerable as I thought I was.
Because what happens in that middle school brain is that we rule ourselves out of things. We choose not to participate in things that are actually good for us. We choose not to take risks or not to offer ourselves in certain situations. And in doing that, we're making ourselves smaller. We're creating more of the problem that more things are out of our control. And if we can learn that we have more agency than we think, that there are choices that we can make, small choices, little risks, ways that we can show up more as ourselves, that gives us more agency, not just on the internet, but in our whole lives.
Absolutely. Because this isn't about what happens on the internet anymore. This is about what our brains have been trained to see the world, how they've been trained to see the world.
That's right.
And we're 20 years into this and we're really well trained. And the reality is, like you said, we're really not that at risk.
There's no lion behind the bush. There's no one trying to kill us.
And I get that our bodies feel that way. I get that our hormones and our nervous systems are just dialed up to 11 because we've been plugged into a system that thrives on us being dialed up to 11. But the opportunity is to step away from that just a little bit. You don't have to quit Instagram. You don't have to boycott whatever. Like, honestly, most of that stuff's performative anyway. What we have to do is we have to pivot our attention that 5 or 10 degrees. And all of a sudden you start to see a slightly different world. And then you see a slightly different world even further and a slightly different world even further. And all of a sudden you're like, well, why was I concerned about that thing over there?
Yes.
That's not even a thing. Like, that's not even real. But when you're staring at it, you can't help but think it's real.
Can I use another example there, Nick? When I talk to business owners about getting new business, the first thing out of all of their mouths is, well, I don't want to do cold email. I'm like, why are you even thinking about cold email? Like, that's the internet solution. The internet solution is big numbers and spray and pray. And right. What if you just talk to 10 people? What if you talk to 10 people you've already done business with and ask them who else you should be doing business with? Like, working on those small, direct things that give you more agency and that where you have actual control over the outcome, as opposed to mediating it through all of these platforms.
Yeah. I'm passionate about this because I've had to learn all these lessons the hard way. I've had to go through this, like detoxing myself from the idea that this is the only way, has been a 20-year project.
Mm-hmm.
And, I went all in. I was there in 2015 and 2016 and 2017 on stages talking about let's Uberize everything. Let's automate. Let's build the hybridized human. I have an old deck about hybridizing humans. I was all in, and it's a long story that's not for today's episode, but what it cost me was so close to everything. And it took me a long time to be able to go, oh wait, we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. And it was one decision after another, after another, after another, after another. And most of those decisions didn't feel like they were connected to each other. They were just, you wake up and you'd make a decision. But then you see it in the rear view and you're like, oh, there's a path. Mm-hmm. And Dam's Given really is about the path, that if we reorient to the rules we're willing to follow. One of the other rules is it was never about you. And I know we all know that, right? None of us go, oh, that's such a revelation. Thank you, Nick, for your glorious revelation. But when we detox a little bit and we allow ourselves to set in like, oh, it's not about me, which means therefore I don't have to be afraid.
I had a previous coach. She would say, when you're feeling unsettled or dysregulated, you need to stay. And by stay, she meant stop thinking it's about you. Most of the time when we're dysregulated, it's because we think, oh, I've done this terrible thing, or someone's offended by me, or, it's not you. 99 times out of 100, it has nothing to do with you. And so if we stop thinking about it's about me, then life gets a lot better.
And we're going to, just so you guys know, you're like, well, gosh, this is turning into a therapy podcast. I promise you it's not. We're still going to look at this through the lens of the world that's confronting us. We're going to look at it through the lens of AI and of business growth and of leadership and of the hard decisions we have to make and the lies we're being told. But we're not going to stop at the lies we're being told. We're going to look at those clear-eyed and go, that is the man behind the curtain. Now what do we want to do? And sometimes what we want to do is read a book. And sometimes what we want to do is go have a conversation, right? So I'm not turning this into systems problems that are solved by individual action. Sometimes the answer is not go fix the world. Sometimes the answer is go for a walk to rehumanize your own nervous system. But we're going to look at
different options that you didn't think were there 10 minutes ago.
Yes, because we've been hijacked.
So if you're excited as I am about where this is going, Nick, what can people expect in terms of what's coming up in this feed?
Yeah, so like I've alluded to, we're going to move to more of a interview style. I may potentially do a couple podcasts, just me. We'll see how that goes. I really would welcome your feedback on that. I've done I have a community that I run, the Trust Made Growth community. If any of you are interested in that, you can message here at the podcast and find out more about Trust Made Growth, or you can just go straight to trustmadegrowth.com. But in that community, I've been testing just some almost video style reflections on big topics. People have been really responsive to that. So we're going to try a little bit of that here, see how that works. But obviously the bulk of the content will be interview based, and interviews in the sense that it's a sharing of ideas. Mm-hmm. So you see a lot of interview podcasts where it's like, hey, let's bring this guy on so he can promote his thing. And then maybe some of you will go be his client kind of a thing, or go buy his software or whatever. That's not the kind of interviews we're talking about. I'm really committed to this being a brains on podcast. I can't make it any other way.
That's true.
So when we bring on guests, we're going to challenge those guests. We're going to challenge their thinking. We're going to ask them to dig deeper into why they're doing what they're doing. And we're going to invite them to do the same for me and to challenge me. And so, yeah, can you still listen to it while you're on the Peloton? Sure. But it is a Brains On podcast. And at great high risk, I intend for it to also be a Hearts On podcast too. And because I think that's how we get out of this.
Agreed, 100%.
It's Brains On, Hearts On. Both. And we can't just do one without the other. And that's how we're going to have the fuel to put one foot in front of the other. So, and then Brad's going to be back. We're going to have Brad dive in on some hot topics as we go. And again, in the spirit of experimentation, we're going to maybe do a little video, see how video goes. I hate video. I'm still mad about it killing the radio star, but apparently
it's
people like
exponentially
it.
more work to produce. That's the struggle with it.
And just, again, because I don't give a crap about algorithms, it's not to play the game of algorithms. It's because some of you have said, the feedback I've gotten is, Nick, you make a lot more sense when I can look at you. I'm like, well, I'm sorry for that, for everyone involved. But if that's true, and it's easier to find meaning by being able to make digital eye contact here together, then let's give that a go.
Well, I'm excited about where this is going, Nick, and I look forward to being a recurring part of it and listening to you with some guests and with some solo episodes. So still an every 2-week cadence?
Yeah, I think so. In my dream world, it'll be a little bit more than that, but we'll stick to every 2 weeks as our commitment for now, and we'll see where that goes.
Excellent.
All right. Well, guys, this is officially the last episode of the Working Broken branding. It will be in the same feed. So we're not creating a new feed. The old episodes will be there. It's just you'll see the name of that feed transition over to Damns Given. And we'll see if the internet demigods punish us for a profanity-laced title, but we'll find out about that. The old episodes will be there, and then the new episodes will be under the new banner under Damns Given. So those of you who are subscribed, you just stay subscribed. You don't have to go find somewhere else. And I look forward to hanging out and chatting. And
I look forward
meeting
to
some new people. You guys have been really warm towards some of the people we brought on and been really inspired by what they had to say. And I think you're going to feel the same about some of our future guests as well. So, Brad, where can we find you? Because some people on this call need you. So where can we find you if we're looking for coaching, leadership coaching?
Anchoradvisors.com is the place to find me. And if you're interested to see, what part of what we've been talking about here is this agency and our ability to manage ourselves. If you go to anchoradvisors.com/self-leadership-assessment, there's a little 10-question assessment there that can help you to see where you can grow in your own self-leadership.
Awesome. All right. Well, gang, you will see us here again under the banner, or see me here again under the banner of Damns Given. And until then, give a damn, I guess. I don't have an outro yet.
Yeah, I know. We got to work on that.
All right. Somebody send me an outro. Somebody send me a good outro. Until then, we'll see you. Thanks, everybody.